In 2012, a researcher looking at satellite images of a remote Pacific island noticed something that made his blood run cold. There, visible from space, were what appeared to be geometric patterns on the beach, possibly spelling out help or forming an SOS signal. The island? Nikumaroro, one of the most isolated places on Earth, thousands of miles from civilization. The terrifying part? These patterns might have been there since 1937, placed by the most famous missing person in history, Amelia Earhart. Imagine being stranded on a deserted island, arranging stones to spell help, watching the sky every day for 75 years while planes and satellites pass overhead, and nobody notices until decades after you're gone. This is that story. July 2nd, 1937, Amelia Earhart, the most famous female pilot in the world, is attempting something no woman has ever done: fly around the entire world at the equator. She's already completed 22,000 miles of her journey. She has just 7,000 miles left. She's flying a twin-engine Lockheed Electra, one of the most advanced aircraft of its time, with navigator Fred Noonan, an experienced aviation pioneer. They take off from New Guinea, heading for Howland Island, a tiny coral atoll in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Howland Island is basically a speck of land in an enormous ocean. It's 1.6 miles long and half a mile wide. Finding it in 1937, with 1937 navigation technology, in the middle of the Pacific, is like trying to find a specific grain of sand on a beach while blindfolded. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca is stationed near Howland to provide radio navigation assistance. Everything should work perfectly, except it doesn't. At 7:42 a.m., Earhart radios the Itasca. "We must be on you, but we cannot see you. Fuel is running low. Been unable to reach you by radio. We are flying at 1,000 feet." At 8:43 a.m., her last confirmed transmission: "We are running north and south." And then silence. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan vanish into thin air, taking with them one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century. The immediate search was massive, the largest and most expensive air and sea search in American history at that time. The U.S. Navy and Coast Guard searched 250,000 square miles of ocean. They found nothing. Not a single piece of wreckage, not an oil slick, not a life raft, nothing. It was as if the plane had been erased from existence. After 17 days, the official search was called off. The official conclusion: Earhart and Noonan ran out of fuel, crashed into the Pacific Ocean, and sank. Case closed. Except the story doesn't end there, because people don't just vanish. And Amelia Earhart wasn't just anyone. She was an international celebrity, a hero, an icon. She had dinner with presidents. She was friends with Eleanor Roosevelt. She'd broken records, shattered gender barriers, and inspired millions. The world demanded answers. Over the decades, theories multiplied. Some said she was captured by the Japanese, who controlled many Pacific islands at the time, and was executed as a spy. Others claimed she survived, returned to the U.S. under a new identity, and lived out her life in obscurity. Some even suggested she was on a secret spy mission for the U.S. government. But one theory kept coming back, supported by increasing amounts of evidence: the Nikumaroro hypothesis. Nikumaroro is part of the Phoenix Islands, a group of 8 atolls in the middle of nowhere in the Pacific Ocean. It's about 350 nautical miles southeast of Howland Island, Earhart's intended destination. Today, Nikumaroro is part of the nation of Kiribati. It's uninhabited, it's remote, and in 1937, it was even more isolated. But here's the thing: it's directly on the line that Earhart said she was flying in her last transmission, running north and south. If Earhart missed Howland Island and continued on that north-south line, she would have flown directly over Nikumaroro. And Nikumaroro, unlike Howland, is hard to miss. It's larger, it has trees, it has a lagoon, and it has a flat reef that, at low tide, could serve as an emergency landing strip. If you were running out of fuel and desperately looking for any place to land, Nikumaroro would look like salvation. Here's where it gets interesting. In the days and weeks after Earhart disappeared, Radio operators around the world reported receiving distress signals that they believed came from Earhart's plane. Over 100 credible reports of post-loss radio signals were documented. Many of these transmissions included details that only Earhart or Noonan would know. The transmission suggested that the plane had landed intact somewhere and that at least one person was alive and trying to signal for help. The U.S. Navy initially took these signals seriously. Some of the transmissions were picked up by multiple receivers in different locations, which helped triangulate a possible position. And guess where many of these triangulations pointed? The Phoenix Islands area, the area where Nikumaroro is located. But there was a problem. Radio signals from Earhart's plane should only work if the engine was running to power the radio. And if the plane had crashed in the ocean, the engine would be flooded and the radio wouldn't work. But if the plane had landed on a reef or beach, if it was intact, then the engine could run during low tide when it wasn't flooded, and someone could send radio signals. This suggested that Earhart's plane was on land, not at the bottom of the ocean. The official search didn't investigate Nikumaroro thoroughly. They flew over it once, saw no signs of recent habitation, and moved on. But here's the thing. From the air, a silver plane on a white coral reef would be nearly invisible. And if the plane had been washed into the lagoon or pushed by waves, it might not be visible from above at all. Fast forward to 1940. A British colonial officer named Gerald Gallagher is assigned to establish a settlement on Nikumaroro. The island is being considered for colonization as part of the Phoenix Island settlement scheme. Gallagher arrives on the island with a small group of settlers. And almost immediately, they start finding weird things. On the southeast end of the island, in a spot that would later be called the Seven Site, Gallagher finds a partial skeleton, a woman's shoe, a sextant box, a navigation tool, and some aircraft aluminum. He reports these findings to his superiors. The bones are eventually sent to Fiji for analysis. A British doctor examines them and concludes they're from a stocky European or mixed-race male. The bones are then lost. Gone. Vanished. For decades, this seemed to disprove the Earhart connection. But in the 1990s, forensic anthropologists re-examined the original bone measurements that the British doctor had recorded. Using modern techniques, they determined that the doctor had gotten it wrong. The bones weren't from a stocky male. They were consistent with a tall white female of Northern European ancestry. Someone exactly like Amelia Earhart. The bones matched Earhart's height, build, and ancestry. The probability that these bones belonged to someone other than Earhart was calculated to be extremely low. But without the actual bones to do DNA testing, this couldn't be proven definitively. The bones had been lost, possibly thrown away or buried somewhere in Fiji decades ago. But the bones weren't the only evidence. In 1940, Gallagher also found a woman's shoe. Specifically, a woman's Blucher-style Oxford shoe, size 9 to 10, from the 1930s. Amelia Earhart wore size 9 shoes and was known to wear exactly this type of shoe. There are photographs of her wearing similar Oxford shoes. What are the odds that a woman's American-style shoe from the 1930s would end up on an uninhabited Pacific island? Then there was the sextant box. A sextant is a navigation tool used by ships and aircraft. The box found on Nikumaroro was for a brand-off sextant that was manufactured in the 1930s and would have been used by aircraft navigators. Fred Noonan, Earhart's navigator, would have had exactly this type of sextant. Over the years, more artifacts have been found on Nikumaroro by expeditions from TIRE, the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery. They've found a piece of plexiglass that matches the specific type and size used in the windows of Earhart's Lockheed Electra, aluminum aircraft skin with rivets that match the repair patterns on Earhart's plane, a woman's compact from the 1930s, a zipper from the 1930s, a glass jar from a 1930s-era brand of anti-freckle cream that Earhart was known to use, parts of a woman's shoe heel, tools consistent with what would have been in an aircraft tool kit from that era. Each of these individually could be a coincidence, but together, it's a lot of coincidences. And then there are the distress signals. Researchers have gone back through archives and found dozens of credible reports of radio signals that appeared to come from Earhart's plane in the days and weeks after she disappeared. One particularly compelling signal was received by a teenager in Florida named Betty Clank. She was listening to her radio on the night of July 2nd, 1937, just hours after Earhart disappeared. Betty heard a woman's voice saying, "This is Amelia Earhart. Please help me." The voice said the plane was on land, that water was coming in, that Noonan was injured. Betty wrote down everything she heard and told her father, who dismissed it as a prank. But Betty kept her notes for her entire life. In 2014, researchers analyzed her notes and the timing. The signals Betty described could only have been sent when Nikumaroro's reef was exposed at low tide, which matches the tidal patterns for that date and location perfectly. Other radio operators reported similar signals over the next several days. The signals got weaker over time and eventually stopped, which is consistent with the plane being gradually flooded by rising tides until the engine and radio could no longer function. Now, let's talk about the satellite images, the SOS signal visible from space. In the 2000s and 2010s, researchers began examining high-resolution satellite imagery of Nikumaroro, and they found something strange. On the shoreline, there appeared to be geometric patterns, straight lines, right angles, arrangements that didn't look natural. Some researchers believed these could be signals spelled out in stones or coral, help or SOS, arranged by survivors hoping to be spotted by aircraft. In the 1930s, there was no satellite imagery, but search planes did fly over the area. If you were stranded on an island, creating a large signal that could be seen from the air would be one of the most logical things to do. The patterns visible in satellite images could be remnants of these signals. Still, they're 70+ years later, because Nikumaroro is so remote and undisturbed. Some of these patterns were found near the Seven site, where the bones and artifacts were discovered. Could these be Earhart's last desperate attempts to signal for help? Stones arranged on a beach, visible from above, spelling out a message that nobody saw in time? Here's what probably happened, based on all the evidence. Earhart and Noonan missed Howland Island. Running low on fuel, they spotted Nikumaroro and made an emergency landing on the flat reef at low tide. The plane landed intact. They survived the landing. They were able to run the engine intermittently when the tide was low and the engine wasn't flooded. During these times, they sent radio distress signals. Some of these signals were picked up around the world, but most were dismissed as hoaxes or interference. The official search didn't investigate radio signals seriously enough. 4 days, maybe weeks, Earhart and Noonan survived on the island. They caught rainwater, ate fish and birds, and sent signals whenever they could. But as time passed, the plane was battered by waves and tides. It gradually broke apart or was washed into the lagoon. The engine flooded permanently, and they could no longer send radio signals. They created visual signals on the beach, arrangements of stones or debris that could be spotted from aircraft. But the few planes that passed overhead either didn't see the signals or didn't investigate. Eventually, they ran out of fresh water. Nikumaroro has no permanent fresh water source. During dry seasons, there's no rain. Without water, survival is measured in days, not weeks. One or both of them died of dehydration. Their remains were scattered by coconut crabs, giant land crabs that inhabit the island and are known to drag away bones. Years later, a British colonial officer found some of the scattered bones, along with artifacts from their camp. The bones were misidentified, then lost. The artifacts were dismissed or ignored. And one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century remained unsolved. But here's what's absolutely heartbreaking about this theory. If it's true, Earhart and Noonan died within sight of ships and aircraft. The island is on a shipping route. Planes flew overhead during the search. They sent radio signals that were received but not believed. They created visual signals that weren't seen or were ignored. They were so close to rescue, and yet they died alone on a deserted island. Imagine being Amelia Earhart on that island. You're the most famous woman in the world. You know that people are searching for you. You can probably hear aircraft in the distance sometimes. You're sending radio signals when you can. You've arranged stones on the beach to spell help. And day after day, week after week, nobody comes. The plane breaks apart. The radio dies. The water runs out. And you realize that you're going to die here, on this beach, and the world will never know what happened to you. That's the tragedy of Nikumaroro. Not just that Earhart died, but that she died waiting for a rescue that should have come. Now, I should be clear, this is still a theory. It's the most evidence-supported theory, but it's not proven beyond doubt. The bones that could prove it conclusively are lost. The plane wreckage that's allegedly in the lagoon has been searched for, but not definitively located. DNA evidence is impossible without the bones. Skeptics point out that no smoking gun has been found, no definitive piece of the plane with Earhart's registration number, no personal effects that can be 100% proven to be hers. They argue that all the artifacts could be from other visitors to the island, from passing ships, from the later British colonial settlement. But here's the problem with the skeptical position. You have to explain away a lot of coincidences. You have to explain why bones matching Earhart's description were found on a remote island on her flight path. You have to explain the shoe that matches what she wore. You have to explain the aircraft parts that match her plane. You have to explain the navigation tools that match what Noonan would have had. You have to explain the 1930s makeup jar of a brand she used. You have to explain the radio signals that match the tidal patterns of the island. Each one individually may be a coincidence. All of them together? That's a lot of coincidences. TIRE, the research organization that's been investigating this theory for decades, has conducted multiple expeditions to Nikumaroro. They've used ground-penetrating radar, sonar, metal detectors, and forensic archaeology techniques. They've found dozens of artifacts consistent with the Earhart hypothesis. They've documented everything meticulously. In 2017, TIRE announced they had found a photo from 1937, taken just months after Earhart disappeared, that showed what appeared to be landing gear protruding from the water in Nikumaroro's lagoon. The dimensions and type matched Earhart's plane. They organized an expedition to search the lagoon with deep-sea sonar and remotely operated vehicles. The expedition was inconclusive. They found some promising targets on sonar that could be aircraft debris, but they couldn't definitively confirm it was Earhart's plane. The lagoon is deep, the visibility is poor, and wreckage after 80-plus years would be heavily corroded and possibly buried in sediment. Other researchers have proposed different theories. Some believe Earhart was captured by the Japanese on the Marshall Islands and died in Japanese custody. There are accounts from locals who claim to have seen a white woman and white man being held by Japanese forces. Some U.S. servicemen after World War II reported hearing rumors about Earhart being captured and executed. But the evidence for the Japanese capture theory is mostly anecdotal and secondhand. There are no Japanese records that mention Earhart. No photographs, no documents, no physical evidence. Just stories and rumors. The most recent scientific analysis of the Earhart mystery came in 2018 when a forensic imaging specialist analyzed the 1937 photo that purportedly showed landing gear in Nikumaroro's lagoon. Some experts said it could be Earhart's plane. Others said the image was too unclear to determine anything. The debate continues. Here's what we know for certain. Amelia Earhart disappeared on July 2nd, 1937, while attempting to fly around the world. Her last known position was somewhere near Howland Island in the Pacific. A massive search found no trace of her or her plane. Radio signals consistent with distress calls from her plane were reported for days after her disappearance. Bones and artifacts consistent with Earhart and Noonan were found on Nikumaroro Island. Multiple pieces of aircraft debris matching her plane type have been found on the island. The bones were lost before modern DNA testing could be performed. What we don't know for certain, where exactly Earhart crashed, how long she survived, what her final days were like, where her remains ultimately ended up. The Nikumaroro theory is compelling because it explains all the evidence. It explains the radio signals that were received after her disappearance. It explains the artifacts found on the island. It explains the bone measurements. It explains why the plane was never found in the ocean. It provides a coherent narrative that fits the facts. But it's also incredibly sad. If true, it means that Amelia Earhart didn't die instantly in a crash. She survived. She suffered. She tried desperately to signal for help. She watched the sky hoping for rescue. And she died slowly, probably of thirst, on a beautiful deserted island that became her tomb. The SOS signals visible from space, if that's truly what they are, represent one of the most tragic missed opportunities in history. Imagine if modern satellite imagery had existed in 1937. Imagine if someone had seen those patterns from above and investigated. Imagine if the radio signals had been taken seriously. Imagine if the search had extended just a bit further and checked Nikumaroro thoroughly. Amelia Earhart could have been rescued. She could have survived. She could have completed her round-the-world flight and lived to old age, continuing to inspire generations. But instead, she became one of history's great mysteries, her final resting place unknown, her last days a matter of speculation and theory. There's something deeply human about the Nikumaroro theory. It's not about aliens or conspiracy or grand plots. It's about a navigator making a small error, about a pilot making a desperate decision to land anywhere rather than crash in the ocean, about survivors doing everything they can to signal for help, and about the cruel reality that sometimes help doesn't come in time. In 2024, there are still expeditions being planned to search Nikumaroro. New technology, better sonar, better imaging, better DNA recovery techniques might finally provide definitive answers. The bones might be found again, or DNA might be recovered from artifacts. The plane wreckage might be located in the lagoon and positively identified. Or maybe the mystery will never be fully solved. Maybe Nikumaroro will keep its secrets. Maybe Amelia Earhart's final resting place will remain unknown. But what we do know is this. Somewhere in the Pacific, on a remote island or in the depths of the ocean, lie the remains of one of history's greatest aviators. And whether it was on Nikumaroro or elsewhere, Amelia Earhart's final moments were probably spent looking at the sky, hoping for rescue, refusing to give up hope even as hope faded away. That's the legacy of Amelia Earhart. Not just her achievements as a pilot, not just her role as a pioneer for women, but her courage in the face of impossible odds. She flew into the unknown. She faced danger with determination, and when the end came, she faced it with the same bravery that defined her life. The SOS from space, whether real or imagined, is a reminder that sometimes the most important signals go unheard. Sometimes help comes too late. Sometimes we don't find the answers until decades after they matter. And sometimes the greatest mysteries are the ones where we know just enough to imagine the tragedy, but not enough to know the full truth. Thanks for watching. And remember, next time you see satellite imagery of a remote beach, look closely. There might be a message there, written in stones by someone who needed help long ago. The universe is full of unanswered signals, and sometimes the most heartbreaking ones are the ones we only notice in hindsight. Stay curious, stay compassionate, and never stop searching for answers. Because somewhere out there, the truth is waiting to be found.